Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. Mo Nawara is currently winning hopefully a poker tournament that we are unable to record with him. He's got plenty of props up on TheLines.com and other things you can look at there about the NFL Championship Sunday, which is what Nate and I are looking at in this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. As long as there's football, we are bringing you NFL player props this season. Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into this. We are going to get some passing, rushing, and receiving props in here for you guys, as we want to do. We're going to channel some Mo stuff here, as well as we know what some of his picks are that we want to talk about on his behalf, which we agree with, I believe. So I think we feel pretty confident about them. But Nate, let's go ahead and jump into your first passing prop for this NFL Championship Sunday.
Yeah, and if you guys have been watching the show the last few weeks, I think you know where Mo's going with his passing prop. But we both like some Jalen Hurts numbers. I know this is, kind of the toughest test for him yet. I'm leaning more towards just the volume of passing in terms of 20.5 completions, in terms of 31.5 attempts, which is even money at BetMGM. Just because it's a 49ers defense, you can't just run the ball on. Certainly not the way they did against the Giants last week when Hurts only had to go 16 for 24. You look at his game against Tennessee earlier this season, which is the number one run funnel defense, if you will, forcing the higher percentage of yardage through the air. And Hurts just went off. San Francisco is a different situation, and maybe they have a little more talent in coverage, but I think we're looking at closer to the volume he had last year against Tampa Bay in the wild card round, which was a great run defense. He went 23 for 43, had 258 yards. He's been more efficient at home all year. The numbers haven't been incredible because of a lot of blowouts. But the Eagles do continue to play at the fastest pace in neutral situations, also at the fastest pace in games that are plus or 6- in terms of margin. So I think he'll keep his foot to the gas here. A lot more pass attempts than we might expect if that running game is not working as much. San Francisco faces 35 pass attempts per game, including 37 against Dallas, a team that wants to run the ball at all else last week. So I think the Eagles will be passing.
Yeah, I think they're gonna be passing. I'll talk about something in a little bit. They're gonna be setting that up with some running and some RPOs, whatever. But the passing will have to be there a bit more, and I think they will have to dink and dunk a little bit more as well to add to your game theory here. And just the pace for them, man. I think they got to keep it up as well, especially if they're going to neutralize that pass rush as much as they can, which is a lot of what I'm going to talk about in my prop with him in a little bit. But for the sake of the same sort of game script going on here, I can see the completions piling up for him with those shorter yardage situations, where also the Niners are very bad, by the way, in those shorter yardage situations. You can complete a lot of those third and sort of less than fives, if you will, against them, which is one of the only places that that defense is a little bit vulnerable. So I'll go ahead and talk about the other passing prop we're going to use here from Mo with love. Under Joe Burrow, 280.5 passing yards. That's minus 125 at MGM. If you want slightly better juice, you can find it at 277 at other books. But I think we just like making sure we can get a few little extra yards. Nate and I are a little bit more conservative than you might see from Mo, but under his passing prop in 5 of these last 6, including the playoffs that he's been playing in. And I think part of that is actually some of the same game theory that we're talking about with Hurts, which is get rid of the ball quickly and dink and dunk a little bit more. But that's because his offensive line is terrible as opposed to Jalen Hurts, which continues to be one of the best in the league. But yeah, with those O-line injuries, a couple of guys still game time decisions for them, Alex Kappa and Jonah Williams for the Bengals. You can expect some of the same type of stuff in terms of needing to get the ball quickly, not letting his receivers get down the field quite as much for those passing yards. He did get 286 versus Kansas City in week 13 on 25 of 31 completion percentage when they were at home. But I don't think we think that is completely sustainable, Nate. His yards per game on the road versus at home this season, 269 on the road versus the 293 at home. So some pretty stark differences there. And under 265 passing yards every playoff game so far, except versus the Titans elite run defense was number one in the league in terms of limiting rushing yards this season. So I think there's some reason to continue to back Burrow. He's got another really high passing prop, and I don't think that I'm necessarily saying I'm picking against those Bengals this week, but I don't think that Joe Burrow will need to get 281 yards to win the game necessarily.
No, I mean, the Bengals are a team, man. They're an incredible defense. They have good scheme, and I mean, they're going to be in this game, but it's not going to be because Joe Burrow's chucking it all around the yard necessarily. And if you look at the game flow, like if they don't get down 21-3 like they did last year in the AFC title game, I mean, he was only barely over 200 against Buffalo because they got out ahead. And when they got down 21-3, he still only had 250 yards in overtime against the Chiefs last year. So, I mean, the passing props are routinely too high just because he's one of the most efficient passers in the league. Does not mean he's going to have that insane volume, especially the way they're playing that quick passing game right now. And that segues into rushing, though. I do like the Bengals to have some success on offense, and I like them to run the ball against the Chiefs who will try to limit the big passing play and will give up a lot of play a lot of soft boxes and give it up underneath. In their last 3 playoff games, they're giving up 123 on the ground at 5.3 yards per carry. So we're looking at Joe Mixon again. I tried to have Josh throw that in the show last week. He wasn't feeling it against Buffalo, and he went. I mean, it was unexpectedly dominant performance from this Bengals offensive line that we thought was banged up. But look, because they can't necessarily pass protect, you gotta keep the defense off balance with some creative running formations, and Mixon handled the bulk of the workload. 20 carries for 105 against the Bills. He had 21 carries for 88 in the AFC title game last year, again with negative game script. So his prop at just 14.5 carries, I think, is what I lean to more than the yardage at 58.5. I don't mind that, but it's up to minus odds because he just cruised past that. I just think give him the carries, 15 carries. I think the Bengals are not going to get blown out or trail as much as they did last year by any means. And they're going to continue to try to establish the running. And he's even money to get a touchdown at some point. I don't think that's quite as confident, but you can throw that in there.
It's not that I'm not confident in it necessarily as much as I'm like minus 105 for any time for Joe Mixon isn't quite worth it for me. I'd like to see some plus odds on that for me to feel a little bit better. But at the same time, a lot of this game script that we're talking about here that we think for the Bengals continuing to have to play a little bit quicker as soon as they snap the ball. There might not be quite as many opportunities for longer touchdowns that would prevent Joe Mixon from getting close to the goal line and getting all those carries that he does when they get into goal and short. But either way, I think all over the field they're going to need to once again neutralize some of the pass rush that Spags brings it in the playoffs especially. It's like Spagnuolo's defense in the playoffs is a different breed than what it is during the regular season. As it's just pressure in an already sort of pressure filled situation for opposing quarterbacks. But this is cool Joe Mixon alongside cool Joe Burrow. And 15 carries. I would feel okay about that. I'm not jumping right along. I don't love betting on Joe Mixon this season is my only thing, but I think as far as who's going to get the carries, it is going to be him. And if we were doing this video a little bit more in sort of chronological fashion, I would just segue to my receiving prop for Samaje Perine, but I'll wait on that to finish our rushing prop here, Nate, and talk about Jalen Hurts. And I'm going to take him over on the rushing yards. We talked about this a little bit just a minute ago. We touched on that we were going to be talking about this for him. 47.5 is what I found, minus 115 on DraftKings as we are recording this on Thursday night before these games are played. So, I don't think it's going to change much because it's only dropped like a very tiny smidge, basically from 49.5 when I saw it a few days ago as well. So it's not really moving around too much. I think it is pretty fair, but mobile quarterbacks versus the 49ers defense and DeMeco Ryans since last season, they haven't played that many. Somehow Kyler Murray actually doesn't play whenever the Cardinals play the 49ers in division, but mobile quarterbacks, this year, Mariota Mariota would really be the best example of the main rushing quarterback where they actually script rushes for him. 50 yards for that in that game, and that was just on 5 carries for Mariota. And then Fields last week in week 8, last season in week 8, 103 yards on 10 carries. I know he kind of shut them down a bit, but if you were in week 1 this season, he got shut down more by the 49ers. But that was also a situation where there was a monsoon going around, and it was just awful conditions for anybody. So they also did, Hurts did play against him last season, 82 yards on 10 carries, and has obviously only gotten a bit better this season. And like I said, when we were talking about his passing yards, the game script is going to continue to be, as far as rushing for them, this sweeping nonsense that I hate and just destroy the Giants, with Hurts and running backs to neutralize the defensive line, whether it's an RPO or an actual sweep option that he has as well. That's just going to be what they do because otherwise if this defense is getting north and south on you, this defensive line and Bosa there, you're in huge trouble. So they want to keep things in short situations as well. I think they're happy as opposed to last season where they got a big chunk yardage consistently, which led to the need for only about, plus the great field position their defense put them in, but the need for, the shorter fields for them basically were the reason that 24 attempts was all you saw from Jalen Hurts. I think you're going to see even more rushes where you only had a few attempts for 34 yards last week. They didn't really need to worry about that as much, especially with the way Miles Sanders was running. I kind of also like under on him, to be honest, against this team, but 57.5 was his rushing yards, a little bit too high for Miles Sanders. But yeah, for the over on this one, like I said, dink and dunk, a little bit slower, not slower pace, but I think they're fine with like a 16, 17 play drive, keeping the ball out of Brock Purdy's hands and all the talent they have over there, mostly, Christian McCaffrey. But like I was mentioning earlier, San Francisco, while they're third in terms of defensive, their DVOA on third down, they're 15th. 39% conversion rate allowed, but then you talk about third and less than 5, they're 31st. Third and 5 plus, they get back to being really good. So you got to avoid being a third and long against this San Francisco team, and I think that just continues to mean that they want to get to those third and shorts. They're fine with a 3rd and 3, especially with their 65% success rate this season when they get into 3rd or 4 or less. So I think all of that just adds to that game script that we're talking about. A lot of rushes that are going to be needed, and that's going to lead to a bunch of yards for Jalen Hurts.
Not sure about this one. That's me channeling Mo. That's how he responds when he doesn't when he's not fully behind a prop.
Very good, Mo.
The Hurts shoulder, and I mean, you're talking about Hurts and the Eagles picking up a lot of key conversions on 3rd and short, but that's not going to rack up yardage. I just don't really see him breaking long runs against the 49ers. I don't see anybody running well against them, which is why I took his passing volume, and why I agree with you completely on Miles Sanders on the under. I thought it was just 50 yards or 60 rushing and receiving, but I put that in our article on the lines that we do like under Miles Sanders in terms of rushing prop. I'm also a little scared of this under, but we are going to take one, and it's Jamar Chase at 83.5 yards at MGM. You can find it at 85.5, like Burrow. If you shop around, you can find a couple more yards at different books. And like Burrow, I mean, we're concerned about them being able to hold up in pass protection in particular, and get the ball down the field to Chase, who's going to draw a lot of Trent McDuffie, talented rookie, who's actually only allowed 23 yards per game in his coverage this season. And both him and L'Jarius Sneed are healthy. They were banged up a lot this season, but they're fine now. With those line protection issues, I mean, Chase went for 5 and 61 in snowy conditions in Buffalo. The weather's not supposed to be great in Kansas City either. And we talk a lot about game flow. I mean, how's Patrick Mahomes' ankle going to be? Is this going to be the kind of electric shootout that you would think, maybe if you looked at this game on paper a couple months ago, or is this going to be really the defenses and the running games and truly like playoff football going to be how this is decided? And last year, again, even with the Bengals in comeback mode, Chase 6 catches, 53 yards, not a huge line. I mean, all the shit that the Bengals have talked while winning 3 straight over the Chiefs and the massive line Chase put up on them before that playoff game, it's definitely a motivating factor. And now at home, I think that Chiefs defense comes to play, and they should try to take away Burrow's number 1 option.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think Patrick Mahomes' ankle is another reason we don't really like Chase receiving yards in this one, because of the way that they're going to have to play and the way that we see things at least slowing down a bit in terms of that big play ability. Another reason we like the Joe Burrow under there. So finishing things off with a Bengal who I like over on receiving yards, and that is Samaje Perine. But 13.5 receiving yards for him, Nate, where his prop is at, is much less than the 83.5 we talk about with Jamar Chase. Minus 115 on BetMGM is where I found the best odds for Samaji's receiving yards. Once again, that quick release passing game with offensive line injuries and issues, that's been the case since week 18, which is why Joe Burrow has been down to about 6.9 nice intended air yards per pass, because of the fact that, he doesn't have time to wait for guys to get much further down the field. Who's obviously catching the ball for the majority, and not necessarily the majority, but who's more likely to catch the ball in those shorter yard situations, and is the running backs. That's why about 20% of his targets since week 18, when they started losing, offensive linemen just started dropping like flies. I believe they lost their first one that week, then a couple the next week. So 20% of his targets since then to running backs just for that reason. They only had 7 combined targets, did Pirine and Mixon versus Buffalo last week. Those 7 combined targets, but that was against a Buffalo team that is third in DVOA at just 30, giving up just 30 yards per game to running backs, as opposed to KC, who is 28th in DVOA against those running back passes, and they're allowing about 46 receiving yards per game to running backs. There have been 23 different running backs that have recorded 13 plus yards versus Kansas City this season. So I don't think you should be worried, even if Joe Mixon is in there on certain pass plays, which he hasn't been used nearly as much as Pirine. Then either way, like I said, you can still expect Pirine to both these guys to probably get some yardage in the receiving game there at KC, just to add 6th in pressure rate. We know Spags' defense is going to bring it. We can probably expect some pretty crappy weather coming out there, and that's something that will go ahead to help the need for a shorter passing game. Can't have the ball in the air for too long, and Pirine has been running a ton of routes in his last 4 games, 18, 19, 19, and 21 different routes that he's run over those past 4 games, and that's more than Joe Mixon in about 3 of those 4 games. So I think you can expect a bunch more routes for him, and the fact that they need to keep those dink and dunk passes going against a team that gives up a ton of yards as they're blitzing all those linebackers and fast quick linemen like the Chiefs are. There's opportunity for the running backs to leak out.
A lot of correlation here, picking four of 6 Bengals, and we're trying to kind of predict how this game will play out. And hopefully we're right. Hopefully, but I think if we're picking the line on this game, I am still taking the Chiefs. I think Mahomes will get shot up with whatever he needs for that ankle to be working, and I just don't think you're going to beat this team 4 times in a row. I don't think they're going to get turned away from the Super Bowl yet again after that crazy collapse last year. So in honor of Mo, who lives relatively close to KC, go Chiefs.
Yeah, that's fair. They're all the way back to -1. I think people saw him walking 19 steps from the podium back to the locker room and were like, whoa, he can walk. All right, Chiefs, him or the Chiefs, because it went from like -2.5 for the Chiefs, or for the Bengals, to -1 for the Chiefs in a couple days. But either way, it's going to be a really fun Sunday, Nate. A lot of people think this is the best NFL weekend that you have with the best teams playing anyway. And we'll definitely see all that. So make sure to like and subscribe, like we said, so you can come back and check out the rest of these NFL games that we're bringing you player props for. And until we see you next, happy betting.